Kubernetes, what you think still missing in the CNCF ecosystem, what you still think need to be improved in the moving forward, and what you think after the 2022, what is your primary goal? What are your current goals set? What we expect from you? What your goals are for the 2022?
That's such an extensive question, to be honest. What's next for Kubernetes community and the cloud native community? I think, so one thing that I've been working with in the past couple of months is have a cloud native maturity model. So and why is this necessary? Because if you look at the CNCF landscape at the moment, there are hundreds of tiles and different projects and organizations that are affiliated with CNCF, and it's just overwhelming to look at it. And if you're an organization that starts on the cloud native journey, you have plethora of choices when it comes to networking. You have so many choices if you want to do storage. You have so many solutions for service mesh. Like you really kind of, it's an extensive space, and it's very difficult to kind of make one decision and know that's going to be a good decision. Like well, the short answer, there is not one kind of gold, silver bullet for everything, or like a golden path. But providing some guidance can be extremely useful. So not providing solutions, but providing some guidance of how can you maybe choose the best tool based on where you are with your organization.
Thank you everyone for tuning into the CloudNative.fm podcast, and today we will be talking about KCNA. And if you are into the KubeCon LA, you know this exam is recently into the conference, introduced into the conference, and today I'm really happy the people who put out this effort on creating this exam is on the call with me. And her name is Katie Gamanji, and he's been a wonderful open source contributor, a Linux Foundation member, and put on a great amount of positive energy with a lot of great projects and a lot of positive energy behind these wonderful creation of exams or the KubeCon or these conferences. I think you hope you meet him virtually, and tonight is been by pleasure I am talking to her. Thank you very much on being on the podcast, Katie. Can you introduce yourself to my audience who are listening to this podcast?
Thank you for having me today. I'm extremely excited to be here and talk more about the KCNA exam. I could start with a brief introduction as well. So as mentioned, my name is Katie Gamanji, and currently I am working for CNCF, or Cloud Native Computing Foundation. This is the foundation that pretty much is the home for a lot of projects, open source projects, such as Kubernetes, Prometheus, Rook, and many other projects. We have around 100 of them, and we try to provide this vendor-neutral space for these projects to grow and pretty much provide new features and functionalities to the industry when it comes to cloud native. In my day-to-day role, however, I am working with the end-user community. And this is the community, or these are the organizations that adopt cloud native, but they don't sell it. So this vendor neutrality of this community that I'm working with, it's quite important. In the past couple of months, however, I have been leading the creation of the KCNA exam. And this was mostly based on the feedback from the community to have a more beginner-friendly and inclusive evaluation. And I'm more than happy to talk about the current collection of certifications that we have, and how we added the KCNA and how we worked on this as well. So in addition to my CNCF role, I have many roles within the community as well. I am one of the members of the advisory board for Captain, which is a sandbox CNCF project. As well, I'm working with the OpenUK. Since I'm based in the UK, I'm working with the OpenUK, making sure that open standards are used fairly across hardware, software, and data. And at the same time, I'm the creator of the Cloud Native Fundamentals course, which takes everyone from little programming experience to deploying an application on a cluster and automating that using CI/CD. So I'm happy to answer questions around all of these positions that I have within the community.
Thank you, and thank you very much for elaborating all this. And I think that's a great opportunity to talk about all these things along the conversation. So tell us first about your experience because KubeCon LA is recently ended, and tell us, my audience, what's your key takeaway from this conference?
So I always enjoy attending KubeCons. KubeCon is the flagship event for anyone interested in cloud native because we get around or put together the contributors, the maintainers, the adopters, all of them in one venue, in one big event. And it's a great event to connect to your peers in the industry, to connect with other end users that adopted cloud native. One thing that I really like about this space is that if you have 100 organizations using Kubernetes, the way they're going to use it is going to be completely different. It's such a flexible and dynamic and pluggable tool that you're not going to find one usage of cloud native that is going to be the same. This is why networking is such an important component when it comes to adoption, but more like exchange those small ideas. How did you implement this functionality, or did you hit this problem when you operate at scale, for example, or when you have like millions of customers, coming in at the same time. So I think KubeCon is not just about sharing the knowledge, but doing improving that experience of networking, collaborating with other individuals from across the world. Now, KubeCon LA, KubeCon and Cloud Native Con LA, just finished in October, and it was a great event because we had it hybrid for the first time. So we had in-person attendees and virtual attendees as well. And I am extremely delighted that I delivered a keynote for this event as well, mainly focusing on the end user community. So pretty much the community that I'm working with, and trying to celebrate their accomplishments and all of the great achievements that they've been doing in the last couple of months since KubeCon and Cloud Native Con Europe. And as part of that keynote, one of the things was introducing the KCNA exam, or Kubernetes and Cloud Native Associate exam. And in addition to that, we've introduced the cartographers group, the new technology radars, the impact that Linux had on our community, and so forth. But again, it's a great event to just be around the community and just reach out to your peers.
Yes, absolutely. I think the CNCF, the Cloud Native, and KubeCon, I think they bring us this idea of being networking. We are being isolated in the past, but ever since the Kubernetes is being open source and the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is being held to maintain this project, I think networking is really easy. And I think that's the essential part of any open source project, because we need end users who can give us a feedback. And at the end of the day, we also need people who bring in the positive energy along with him. And I think that's really vital. And this networking is, everybody listening to us, is an essential piece in the IT right now. And without networking, I think you can't be able to succeed moving forward. So these are all good news. So before we go to the KCNA, shed some light, because you are the open source contributor and open source maintainer, and you wear so many hats during your in the different foundation like Linux Foundation, CNCF, and a lot more. So tell us, my audience, about what is open source, how you look at it, and why it is so vital to contribute to the open source if we are living in 2021.
This is such a fundamental question. And I think because I've been working with these open source technologies, I kind of take it for granted that it's a practice that it's widely used everywhere. But the truth to be told, it's not used everywhere. It's widely used now, or it's more it's more extended, or used, or adopted. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. More adopted within the organization nowadays than it was 30 years ago. But open source itself, I think I've mentioned a bit slightly on Linux. So Linux this year turned 30 years. And I think this is a great accomplishment, not only for the development of operating systems, but for the entire open source space, because Linux has been one of the most famous and well-known projects that it's open source at the core. So when it started 30 years ago, they actually had to establish this open collaboration. So open source is, you have a Git repository, you have some code, but at the same time, you don't have any gatekeeping on this code. Anyone would be able to contribute to it. So if you'd like to implement a functionality, you'd be able to do so. If you find, for example, a bug, you use the tool, you adopt it internally, but you found a bug, you'll be able to provide a solution for that particular issue. And this is pretty much a very organic growth of the project based on the demand from the adopters and based from kind of different expansions or extra functionalities that need to be deployed. This project grows slowly but surely. So Linux was one of the biggest successful use case of when it comes to usage of open source. And as mentioned, it's established that how to commit to upstream openly, how to collaborate in a transparent environment, because you have for example, if you're using GitHub, you're going to have issues. These are completely public. You'll be able to see what was an issue in the past, what they're looking on or working on at the moment. So all of this environment of working is transparent and open. But at the same time, it has a governance and code of conduct. So yes, it's important for everyone to contribute, but at the same time, it's important for everyone to be respectful to everyone in the community. But at the same time, to have a way to make sure that good code is merged within the code repository. So some of the projects are going to have different kind of layers of or different hats within a repository. So you're going to have just the contributors, you're going to have the core maintainers, you're going to have people who would be able to review PRs but not merge PRs. So pretty much all of these roles, again, they are distributed within the community, but at the same time, there is a level of kind of controlling, making sure that no one with malicious intentions are going to just merge the code within an open source project that's used by thousands and hundreds of organizations. So there's the governance component that's quite important. And all of these fundamentals, committing to upstream, transparency, governance, code of conduct, all of these are public, but more importantly, these are the fundamentals that kind of extrapolate to cloud native as well. And I think this is why cloud native has been so successful lately. If you look in Kubernetes has been donated 7 years ago. 7 years. This is not a lot of time. CNCF was created 6 years ago to actually provide that house for Kubernetes to develop. But CNCF has been so successful and cloud native has been so successful because the fundamentals of how to use open source, how to contribute to open source and make and grow, they have already been established throughout the years. So with Linux case, we already have 30 years of experience. And we just build on top of those fundamentals. We just put a new technology, a new use case, and we just were able to improve its kind of velocity rate, the rate it's adopted in different organizations massively because those fundamentals were already set.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the point you draw here is that for a 7-year-long project like Kubernetes and the 6-year-long CNCF, I think amount of the fastest growth, we've never seen it before. I think if you are been to the IT, for IT, I'm not in the long, I think 5-6 years right now, but if you've been into the 30 or 4 decades of experience from the different roles, I think for the 7-year-long running project and the amount of adoption it's had, I think that's incredible. That's really incredible. And ton of credit to those people who are involved into this project. And all those things that you mentioned today on the podcast, and that's really important because open source is right now is a focus, because if you incubate or put your project in the open source, it's giving me the opportunity, me and you, to incorporate our changes, our mindset, how we think about code into these projects. And I think everybody can contribute to it open source project, whether you are living in Pakistan or UK or USA or Europe. That's a governance, and the governing body is responsible for everyone, how this environment is being enjoyable place for everyone. And these people are putting a lot of effort creating a friendship background for everyone to contribute to these open source projects. So I think open source is really vital for people who are into the cloud native space, and also the vital for the companies who are investing their money and bringing the new tools every day. And as we see, every time a new tool coming up, for the later 2 or 3 weeks, I see 17 different resources or tons of different resources available. I think that depicts the power of open source. So we cover on the open source part a bit. I think hopefully people are listening to us can understand the importance of open source. So tell us about the course, the exam curricular, how exam being what is the process behind the creation of exam? We see the CKA, CKAD, CKS. These are those specialty exam. People who are the application developer go for the CKAD exam, and the people who are the administrator who are take care of the Kubernetes cluster, they have for the CKA exam. And the people who are just digging into the security side of thing and hacking and making sure the cluster is not hacked by the malicious user, they are looking for the CKS exam. These are exam already into the market, and the new exam is coming up, the KCNA. So tell us about these three exams, on what your opinions are for these three exams, and what are the process of creating the exam in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation.
Absolutely. So you've already done a very great introduction of the existing collection of certification. So we have three of them: CKAD, CKA, and CKS. And these are focused on different personas. So if you're looking within an organization, to begin with, especially if you do the DevOps practice, you're going to have an application or developer team, and you're going to have an infrastructure team. And in the past, I'm not going to talk about DevOps and how it works and what kind of strategies it brings together, but in the past, you have these two different personas. So if you are someone who writes applications, but they package their applications and they still want to interact with the cluster to some extent to understand how the application is deployed, how to troubleshoot it if something goes wrong in production, then the CKAD, or Application Developer Certification, is perfect for you. Next, moving to the infrastructure team, if you are an individual that creates clusters, manages infrastructure, upgrades, maintenance, new features to the platform specifically, then the CKA, or Certified Kubernetes Administrator, is going to be the exam for you. And once we have a cluster, we have an application running within a cluster, most of the time, the next step is how can we secure our application? So how to make sure that it's going to be within a secure environment, within the production system, that the way you connect to your application or the way different components talk with each other are secure. Then you would most likely look into the CKS, or Certified Kubernetes Security Specialist exam. But if you look into all of these are all personas that use Kubernetes or interactive Kubernetes on a daily basis, and they have Kubernetes in production as well. So these are for professionals, very highly skilled professionals, and they would like to credit their skills and experience. This is great, and this has been a great way to have that evaluation of your skills, and the community has been using it thoroughly. We have more than 100,000 registrations for all of these exams alone, which is great. But at the same time, when we're looking into the cloud native at the moment, we have a lot of emerging tools. We have a lot of emerging individuals and even locations that would like to, for example, we see meetups around the world, like in locations we would never imagine, but they use cloud native and they would like to bring the community together. So we see this kind of emerging markets, emerging tooling, and we're growing. As a community, we are growing. But at the same time, we need to grow at the same rate to make sure that we can upskill everyone who'd like to get involved. So we need to provide all the material and resources for anyone interested in cloud native. Just take those resources and move forward with it, for them to have the basic understanding and knowledge to contribute and be part of cloud native. So the feedback that we had in the last year was that we need a way to evaluate or to certify individuals that are just starting with cloud native. So we're thinking about student community. So usually in university, you might do development quite heavily. You might touch upon some of the cloud public providers. Depends on the course and university, but you don't really touch upon open source and cloud native so much. But if you're someone who have heard about this and would like to get involved, this is going to be we're trying to create a certification for those kind of personas. So new students, anyone who is for example, program managers that like to understand what cloud native is and like why exactly Kubernetes is such an important thing for our business. Or thinking about engineering managers, if they don't have hands-on experience, but they still want to certify their knowledge. We wanted to provide a resource for them or a way for them to certify their skills. And this is how the KCNA, or Kubernetes and Cloud Native Associate exam, came to be about. So this is a multiple choice examination. So you're going to have 60 questions to answer in 90 minutes. And it will evaluate everything in regards to your Kubernetes fundamental knowledge, but at the same time examine your understanding of the cloud native space, because cloud native is not just Kubernetes. We're talking about observability, so we're going to have some questions in regards to Prometheus. We're talking about application deployment and CI/CD. In this particular case, we're going to question what GitOps is. For example, how can you use Argo CD and Flux? We're going to question what your understanding of security, networking, storage, and so forth. So we still kind of focus mainly on Kubernetes as the main component for the exam, but we're going to explore other tools, not intensively, extensively, other tools within the cloud native space. So I think the demand really came from, we need something which is more for beginners. We need something that is a stepping stone for someone who would like to get involved in cloud native and be present within this community. And this is where we are now. So KCNA currently, maybe I should mention, is in beta stage. So we're actually finishing the beta stage now. And we're going to have a GA at the end of the month. So we've announced it at KubeCon. We announced so during my keynote, we announced the beta launch and how can you sign up for being a beta tester. And pretty much now we're kind of closing up this beta launch, and then we're going with the GA in a couple of weeks.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's it. Well, for every company, I have talked to 3 or 4 companies out there. They know that when they are moving to the cloud native landscape, it's not just about Kubernetes, because it's all about the observability, the service meshes, and GitOps, and so many other things. So that's really important to understand which person is a better for my organization, how to test those knowledge if they already have. So we are missing this piece, and thankfully for you and your team who are taking this challenge, and everyone is moving comfortable, because we have this exam. We can test those skills for those individuals, and then we'll be able to ready that this person has this kind of requirement, and also I be able to understand what is my level of expertise around the cloud native landscape. So I want to test my knowledge, where to test my knowledge, whom to ask my questions. So I think that's really a wonderful news, because I have a story to hear about, because one of my companies tell me we are looking for the cloud native enthusiast. What are the questions we have tried to ask those people. So I have write down 50 MCQs for them and ask them to, at least if they are comfortable in answering these questions, there might be a good fit. Good food for them. And that moment of them thinking about, if we can have a KCNA exam, and it's not about, it's prior to the KubeCon LA, and we're talking about the month of September, October, I have this kind of feeling. So then I see that the KCNA is coming up, and in a very shortest amount of time, it's taking not much of a time. So that's a wonderful positive energy. That's another, we're talking about people, that's the community who are backing up, providing us a useful feedback, and that's really vital for everyone. So you tell about the KCNA exam, how long it is, what MCQs, what are the passing criteria, and plus what are the different mechanism of MCQs. I've seen there are some strategies on the MCQs, like if you pass, there are some MCQ strategies already existing on the market. So what are the MCQs that the multiple choice questions? What are the passing criteria, plus what are the how the result going to be calculated? I think it's mentioned there, but I need your thoughts around, because there are so much in the mind of the people when designing these courses, and what are the there are so many things to cater for, how to compile the result, what are the possible scenarios, because rightfully we have so many calculations, so many derivatives, so many integrations. So what are the passing criteria, and what are the thinking behind to calculate the result? What are the best result to going after for the KCN exam?
That's a great question. So in terms of passing criteria, this is something that we are currently defining yet. It's going to be part of a result of the beta testing or the beta launch. Because we have 60 questions, we have an amount of responses from our beta testers, and currently we are evaluating if all of the questions that we have at the exams are valid, and if they actually testify or test a particular skill or a particular knowledge about a tool So pretty much, I think the short answer in terms of passing criteria, we are still working on this, but it's just going to be very clear when we're going GA. So still work in progress. But in terms of how to pass the exam, I think like this, it's quite important to look into the curriculum, because we already have the curriculum, which is available and it's public, and you'll be able to explore what are the more important components that you need to study or to focus on. If you like to maybe hack the exam, was be like, I'm just going to learn everything about this, and this is how I'm going to pass the exam. There might be a way, but it's not necessarily 100% success rate, let's put it this way. So if you look at the curriculum, for example, you'll notice that 46% of the entire exam is focused on Kubernetes fundamentals. So going back to the name of the certification is Kubernetes and Cloud Native, which means Kubernetes is going to be quite a big part of it. So when it comes to Kubernetes, one thing, again, like I should be very clear, the KCNA exam does not require production experience. It requires some hands-on experience if you, for example, deploy a cluster locally and can operate some kubectl commands. But production experience is not essential to pass this exam. But at the same time, the way we go around evaluating the skills, we really dig into the core understanding. Do you understand what a container framework or container orchestrator framework is? Do you understand what is a pod? Do you understand what's the difference between a pod and a container? What is the difference between a replica set and a deployment? We really kind of try to understand, like, kind of certify or kind of test if these core understandings are there, because this is the fundamentals of Kubernetes. How can you deploy an application and so forth? So yeah, Kubernetes is going to be a big part of it, but it's not going to be like very shady questions. Like, it's not going to be, tell me this particular parameter that needs to be configured to reach this and this and this functionality, like within a manifest where you have thousands of lines sometimes. We're not going to go like, like very tricky questions, but you still need to study and have a good understanding of what's happening and what's going on. In addition to that, the second part is going to be cloud native. And the cloud native part is, it kind of seems it's like 60% plus. Actually, no, it's 56%. But it's not really, because it's shared across multiple domains. So part of that is going to be runtime. So how exactly do you schedule your applications? Do you understand that? We're going to talk about packaging. Do you know how to containerize your application? Like, for example, if there are other orchestrators for your containers, Kubernetes is one of them, but for example, you had Dockerslim in the past. Do you understand like what these fundamentals are? How can you containerize an application? Security, like there are so many kind of small bits we're going to test. And some of the things already I've mentioned, like observability, GitOps, storage, and so forth. So I think it's, if you really kind of want to get a good percentage of the passing mark, there's going to be Kubernetes. Yeah, 100%. You need to understand what's going on there. But you still need kind of that understanding of the extensiveness of cloud native. And you'll be able to find all of these details on the curriculum. I'm not going to talk about all of them in the detail because it's going to take hours, but you'll be able to find all of these details. So all of this is public. Like, it's not going to be anything tricky. We're not going to ask something that you never heard about or something which is just emerging on the market and it's on the kind of just horizon. It's the knowledge and the fundamentals that have been in the community and in this industry for a couple of years now.
Yes, absolutely. I take this exam as a cloud, on the cloud side, on the public cloud side of the exam. There are so many services running there, and we need some specialist people to have these kind of services. Some people are Azure network engineer, some talking about the public cloud like Azure, GCP, or AWS. We need some engineers who have the technical depth knowledge of what is Azure security, what is Azure networking, and these kind of stuff. But we need some people who know the fundamentals of cloud, how the cloud operate, what are the operating model, and what are the shared responsibilities within the cloud providers. But I take it that exam as a same, like we have these specialities, that's separate part of the business. Now I need a team member who can understand the whole cloud native ecosystem. So I can ask them, go for this course, ready for that knowledge, gain that knowledge, test those knowledge, and then come up and skill up the whole team around the cloud native landscape. What are the different tools available? Let's say me, and if somebody is right now building out some tools on the cloud native ecosystem, Like every day there are tools popping up on the orchestration side, the Kubernetes distro side, the networking, the storage, and these kind of stuff. So people are building out these kind of solutions. They need a team member who can know what are the different, like what are the Argo CD, what Prometheus is, what the service meshes offer, and what are the different ingress controller in Kubernetes, what they try to do. So we need, I think, for my point of view, this exam for those people who are leading the community, who are leaders in the community, let's say the open source community leaders, or they are the developer advocate, or these kind of people who have to come up and test their knowledge around the KCNA exam. So they are preparing for the speaker, the public speaking, or these kind of stuff. I think that they are the number one for me, and for my diary. They are the number one people who can go about this exam, because that's really a mandatory. You can take it at the public cloud, or like Azure or AWS or GCP. Every cloud provider have some fundamental knowledge around their offering, and everybody everybody has to certify those exams. So I think take it as a that's my point of view. So we have exam, like every exam we are into the market, so many stuff. We have seen the CNCF student community is recently doing a wonderful job, educate students around the cloud native and Kubernetes ecosystem. So we cover a lot. Now tell us about what next for the Kubernetes, what you think still missing in the CNCF ecosystem, what you still think need to be improved in the moving forward, and what you think after the 2022, what is your primary goal? What are your current goals set? What we expect from you? What your goals are for the 2022?
That's such an extensive question, to be honest. What's next for Kubernetes community and the cloud native community? I think so. One thing that I've been working with in the past couple of months is have a cloud native maturity model. So and why is this necessary? Because if you look at the CNCF landscape at the moment, there are hundreds of tiles and different projects and organizations that are affiliated with CNCF, and it's just overwhelming to look at it. And if you're an organization that starts on the cloud native journey, you have plethora of choices when it comes to networking. You have so many choices if you want to do storage. You have so many solutions for service mesh. Like you really kind of, it's an expensive space, and it's very difficult to kind of make one decision and know that's going to be a good decision. Like the short answer, there is not one kind of gold, silver bullet for everything, or like a golden path. But providing some guidance can be extremely useful. So not providing solutions, but providing some guidance of how can you maybe choose the best tool based on where you are with your organization at the moment. So the cloud native maturity is something that is emerging. It's something that has been needed again in the community. And I've mentioned briefly at the beginning, but as part of my keynote at KubeCon, I have introduced the Cartographless working group, which has been led by some of the end user organizations. And they are creating this cloud native maturity model with 5 levels. So based on these 5 levels, you would pretty much position your organization. For example, I am in the optimization stage. So I'm in production, I am running, everything is good. I'm looking to optimize. Well, if you like at the build stage, which is the first level, you are in pre-production, kind of trying to understand like what's the quickest way for me to implement this functionality. So they'll provide some guidance for you to navigate the landscape. So I think this is actually quite important. Because we have so many things. I think like in the past, it's been all about emerging technologies. What is going to be the new functionality? Last year, it was about service mesh. Maybe four KubeCons ago, it was about policy and operated OPA and policy agent. It was about security, like especially in the last year, it's been about security. So I have all of these like areas that are popping, and this is going to happen on and off. It depends on the functionality and the maturity of your organization. But I think guidance is quite important when you have so many tools appearing at the same time. If you're looking into very kind of particular, tooling or functionalities that's going to be emerging, I think this KubeCon, the main theme was multi-cloud. I think everyone has been talking about multi-cloud for many years, but now it's in a stage where it's more implementable. It's not necessarily an ideal. It's something that you can actually implement more, and you see a lot of tools focusing on this multi-cloud strategy. So this may be the theme that emerged from KubeCon we had in October. In the KubeCon Europe, which was in May, the emerging theme was, for example, WASM, and how can you have this even further optimized application and containers running. Edge was another thing. How can you have your applications running on the edge? I'm giving talks about how can you use Edge and how can you deploy applications to the edge using GitHub. So this is something that I think it's still an emerging market. It appeared, but we still need to see a bit more movement around it. So I think it's an expensive space, and there's always movement happening in different areas. So I think it depends on what the listeners are interested in. There's definitely going to be something new, like a new tool or a new team, a new working group, something going on. Yeah, but at the same time, I'm really excited to see where this is going to take us, because it's all organic. It's nothing is forced within when it comes to open source. It's an organic growth. If people are not interested, like, you can create the best tool, like, the tool that will create a magically cluster and deploy to production within a minute. Let's put it this way. If people don't use it, if they don't adopt it, then there's no value to it. Like, it should be organic adoption. It should be organic movement and dynamic. And this is what makes it so great to be in this space at this moment, because it's at the center of growing and expanding, but more importantly, you can observe, like, what are the new functionality or the new needs within an organization. And it's great to be in this space and just, if you don't contribute, at least observe what's happening, and it's a kind of a magical world, I would say. But again, this magic is brought by the community, by the adopters. So everything kind of puts together, all of these components together, to create Cloud Native.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's a wonderful news. I think the maturity model is right now is lacking. I see a few of the companies are working on these, like Fairwinds has written out some blog posts on the cloud native maturity model, the Kubernetes maturity model. And my boss is asking me today, can I live in the future? That can I choose, let's say I ask, let's say a tool that I'm using Argo CD and Kubernetes in my current setup, and I click on some kind of a guideline, and it's telling me for your current scenario, is Argo CD, is a Flex CD is work for you. So we are thinking about in our my company that do we have in the future, we can tell us that we have this kind of setup. If we choose these tools, we will be more effective rather than tooling these tools. So that's the maturity model is really lacking at this moment of time. So I think that's a really great news, everybody who are listening to our podcast today, that people are now working on these kind of setup. And also the CNCF landscape that you spoke about today, we are lacking some guides on that. And thankfully from the Jason Morgan and Catherine Pagini from the Linkerd team, they put on the guide on what the landscape was, what is observability in this landscape, what is monitoring, what are the service meshes do, and they precisely pinpoint what are these guides on. So people are working on these small issues, smallish part, but at the end of the day, they take a very, very large value for the end user. That's a really important. The end user or that 90% of our stakeholder in the open source are the end user. As you mentioned, if we build out a magical tool who can put on before any deployment in the world on any cluster or any ingress controller, but nobody is using that tool, I think we have no value of building out that tool. So that's the end user is really talking about. So before I let you go, we talk about Kubernetes, we talk about everything up. So tell us about, because I've seen there are not many women in tech in the cloud native, but few of them. And the women is really the leaders of the Cloud Native Community Foundation, like Priyanka is general manager, Katie is from also a wonderful advisor on that. I see the Ian Coldwater. There are few of them, but they are leaders in the community, but not many. So tell us who are listening to us in the podcast, show there some tips and tricks, how the women can be effective in the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and how should they start about, and some challenges you face during this transition. You can tell us to my audience so they can better plan their career in the moving forward.
I think that's always a tricky question to answer, because there is not one magical thing that you can do and you're going to be successful in tech. As women or as any other individual. I think for women in technology, cloud native apps, it's great. but it could do so much better. There are surveys, I don't remember the numbers on top of my head, but we have the CNCF annual survey, and usually we have the amount broken down by gender, like how many, for example, men versus women are contributing, or non-specified are contributing to open source. And women is still a very short percentage. I don't want to put any numbers now because I don't know them precisely, but I know women is like so much lower than it could be. So in terms of contributions, like we definitely need a more diverse kind of ideas, opinions, and feature contribution. When it comes to the leadership, as you've mentioned, yeah, we have some leaders within the cloud native space, but I think we need to have this more extensively. Again, like it's never enough because we have some figures, but these figures are quite unique. As you've mentioned, you can name them, or like you can number them, or like have 5 women that you know in open source, and that's it. But it's only 5, like but there's so many more. And I think we really need to create this support system for women to feel comfortable. Again, like it's not just for women. I think it's for everyone to feel comfortable to contribute, to speak up about their experience of cloud native, not necessarily cloud native, like their experience of being in tech. I think this is more about a culture, which is a community culture. It's a safe environment to share. I think this is kind of the fundamentals for everything. And it doesn't resume to women, it resumes to anyone who would like to be part of it. And they shouldn't be discriminated, be it on gender, on race, on the way they look, or anything. Like it shouldn't happen. I think open source is great from this regard, like in general, in terms of its culture, because it's open. Usually because it's highly remote, you have people from all around the world. You don't have like one team in one location, they need to kind of contribute and so on. It's usually remote, which means most of the time, you don't really know the individual behind the code. And I think there has been a great talk at KubeCon at some point, someone mentioning that I was just a Git hash. Like my user was just a Git hash, nothing else. Like no one knew if I was a specific gender, like from a specific location and so on. And this is great. Like for people who really appreciate that, they will be able to find it in open source. But we could do so much better into supporting and providing a support system and creating a safe environment for everyone to contribute. Because unfortunately, sometimes when it comes to tech, it's very male dominated. And sometimes this comes with some toxicity around this as well. And I would like for everyone to be aware of that, because it's not just about you, it's about everyone else. Do you make a safe environment for everyone else to be there and contribute? So I think it really resumes to that cultural thing. I think for me, from my personal experience, it's been, Cloud Native has been very welcoming, and I really appreciate that. And I'm trying to make it as welcoming. I'm trying to emphasize the diversity message as much as possible. Again, we never have enough of it. So from my point of view, yeah, I had kind of somehow a smooth sailing, let's put it this way. But I would love to see more women. I would like to see more individuals with from different micro diversities and neurodiversities as well. Why not? Like, let's have as many individuals as possible, and because this is the core of Cloud Native, and we can really, really create a message and emphasize that even further.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are a small portion of women in the cloud native, but they've done a wonderful job. I think they are really wonderful contributors. I think the Anais is a wonderful example of every woman in the world right now. He started the 100 Days of Kubernetes Challenge, and is recently awarded as a CNCF Ambassador of 2021. So I think we need to have some kind of in programs within the communities to push up these barriers, close down the barrier to be more effective. So tell us what are the deal. I think we need some weekly minute calls or weekly minutes on these kind of conversations. Tell us this is a wonderful place for everyone. Everybody is welcoming, and everybody enjoyable, and everybody is, when they achieve something, they are always appreciated and always show a hands up that you've done a wonderful job for this particular project. I think we need some kind of more program to initiate and close down the 50-50 ratio, or maybe more. Then we need more more contributors around the world, especially in the women's side, to help open source contribute, being more mature and more energetic and bringing more innovation into these open source projects. That's the whole purpose of being open source. So for my final question before I let you go, I see you are super busy and always doing a wonderful work in so many different places. So tell me and tell my audience how you plan your day so we can plan accordingly in our, so be more energetic for the day.
Right. Oh, that's a great question. I think it varies from time to time, because if it's, for example, KubeCon time, that's going to be extremely busy. So I'm not going to talk about that. But I think for me, it's so of course I have my daily job, which is pretty much making sure that the end user community is successful, that we grow this community, that their voice is heard out. So my day-to-day job is going to be making sure that I listen to them, making sure that we have the right connections, connecting the bridge between projects and adopters, create programs for them. You mentioned about programs when it comes to women in tech. Well, this is something I have to do for the end user community, like make sure that they have the right benefits, the right exposure. But when it comes to the extracurricular involvement, I think for me, I am maybe on my professional, even personal level, one of my goals is to make cloud native ubiquitous. And this is actually something that correlates with one of the cloud native principles, to make it ubiquitous, so approachable by anyone, to make it a standard, an established standard. And a standard, it's something that is very well known, it's clear, and you can learn it easier. So coming from this kind of goal that I have for myself, I am trying to get myself involved into things that will make it easier for students. Like currently, I'm going to be quite honest, I'm focusing a lot on the students and making it easier for them to step into cloud native. This is why I have the Cloud Native Fundamentals course. This is why I'm leading the creation of the KCNA exam as well. Like it's that entry level. We need a lot of resources that make sure that we can scale as a community, and we need that material. And this is going to, again, like we need to focus on the next generation of cloud native practitioners. We are here now, we're engineers, we've been using cloud native, we feel quite confident about our skills, but we are pretty much the old generation. What's going to happen with the new gen? Like we need to focus on them and provide a good staircase for them. Yeah, I think planning my day depends. I usually like to have a couple of calls in the evenings when it comes community calls. Usually because I'm UK time, in terms of the overlap with the US time, it's usually my evenings. So attending some of the community calls, making sure I'm up to date with the latest projects. If I have anything on my personal map to work on, then I'm usually going to do that in the morning. So for example, when I was creating the course, that usually happen in the morning. When I'm creating my new talks and new demos and I'm exploring new tools, that's usually going to happen in the morning when I'm having my coffee. It's just the perfect time. So I don't have a very kind of set schedule, like 8 a.m. I'm going to do this, and then 9 a.m. I'm going to do this. It varies because some of the projects are sporadic. So for example, when preparing for a presentation that might take me 1 week or 2 weeks, depends on the level of depth I need to go to, or if there's a new tool, I need to learn it and then provide a talk about it. So it kind of varies from the opportunity, from the engagement, and yeah, it's never the same. But usually it's built up around kind of my work time and the community meetings, and then any new projects that I'm working on.
Yes, absolutely. I think that a lot of the cloud native, people who are into the cloud native, it's really difficult to create a timetable or a schedule for the day routine, because all of the stuff happening around and you have to check it up. It's really the interest of yours, and you have to educate people around your open source communities and the people who are living alongside with you. So I think it's a really difficult thing. I haven't come up with any schedule working in the cloud native for the last 3 years. So I think it's been tough, but I think we have to set it up because it's a personal relaxation. The relaxed mind can do wonderful job compared to the tired and fatigued mind. I think we have to put out some plans around it. But it's a wonderful talking to you, Katie. It's been the first time you come. I think you are the second woman from the tech who joined me on the Cloud Native FM podcast. I'm really glad. Hopefully, we can grab more audience around the women and tell us the importance of open source. And we have a collective mind and collective knowledge, so everybody can contribute to this wonderful place for everyone to get involved into the CNCF ecosystem. So thanks for being on the podcast. Hope to catch up you again in the future and tell us about the more open things happening around the CNCF ecosystem. But thank you everyone who tuned into this podcast. Hope to join you again in the future. Thanks everyone. Bye bye. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Nice interactive mode that you can use to pick different commands. So I can choose the build command this way, and then I can choose the target that I want. For example, Nginx latest, and that's pretty much it. If I run it, it starts. It goes through a set of steps. One of the steps is and it ships it back, and then based on that information, it builds a new image. And if we look at the image, Docker images, Nginx. So we went from 133 megs to 11 megs, and